are these people?
You and Indy kind of led me in with this story over the weekend. You guys touched on this a little bit, so we'll get into more details in that. And we, as I mentioned earlier, Haaretz did an op-ed on this story. So given that Haaretz is paywalled and most people will not be able to read that story or would care if they did read it, we're going to read some excerpts of that tonight. It was a long article, so we're only going to highlight the more important bits. But I think even within the first few minutes of what I'm going to mention in regards to this segment, I think you guys will get the general gist of all of this. You guys are smart. So, so the first part, once I get this slideshow going, comes from Substack. New person, you know
BettBeat Media,
BettBeat
correct.
Media.
I
Yeah.
had Vanessa
So
on
this
recently.
is the first time.
All right.
This is the first time I pulled something from them. Oh, by the way, any articles, independent news articles you want to read, you can go to Indie Media Today.
I think it's Indie News
right?
Now. I think that's it.
Indie News Now.
Yep. .com.
And you can .com. You can get to read top independent news
now
articles of the day. You can even watch us there right now if you want. But we like you on YouTube, so stay here. At least for the interaction.
I'll link it in chat for people.
Sure. Just another space if you're tired of mainstream media, and Indie has worked hard to correlate articles from people that we trust and actually do good work. He's put them all on one website, so definitely check that out. But that's where I got this article from. BettBeat Media. They report Gamifying Genocide, how Israel turned mass murder into the game, red light, green light. Israelis have named the slaughter of starving Palestinians Operation Salted Fish, their version of the children's game red light, green light, while the world treats genocide as background noise. So they continue, but actually, I guess this is from Al Jazeera.
Yeah.
This picture and caption here. And underneath, Israeli soldiers film themselves mocking Palestinians in Gaza. I'm sure you guys have seen that on social media. But the caption reads, "Long ethnic Europeans whose ancestors once converted to Judaism mock the Semitic features of the innocent locals they are mass slaughtering with glee, while claiming that they are the true Semites indigenous to the land. There is no great evil as white/Jewish supremacist settler colonialism." So let's get into the article. The Israeli military has achieved something unprecedented in the annals of human cruelty. They have transformed genocide into background noise. As the world fixates on the specter of war with Iran, the daily massacres of Palestinian civilians at so-called aid distribution sites have become what one Israeli reservist chillingly describes as routine, a place with its own set of rules where the loss of human life means nothing. The Israeli newspaper Haaretz has delivered a damning expose that confirms what Palestinians' witnesses have been screaming into the void for months. Israeli soldiers are deliberately gunning down unarmed civilians waiting for food. The headline reads something from a fever dream of human depravity. It's a killing field. IDF soldiers ordered to shoot deliberately at unarmed Gazans waiting for humanitarian aid. But this is no arbitration. This is policy. Israeli commanders are ordering troops to open fire on crowds of starving people as standard military procedure. Since May alone, 549 Palestinians have been slaughtered at these sites, with over 4,000 wounded. The method is as calculated as it is sadistic. Heavy machine guns, grenade launchers, mortars, an arsenal of deploying against people whose only crime is hunger. One Israeli soldier speaking to Haaretz with the casual tone of someone describing a morning routine explained their system. Between 1 and 5 people were killed every day. They're treated like a hostile force. No crowd control measures, no tear gas, just live fire with everything imaginable. He added with chilling matter of factness, our form of communication is gunfire. The soldiers have even given their killing spree a name, Operation Salted Fish, the Israeli version of the children's game Red Light, Green Light. They're literally gamifying genocide, turning mass murder into entertainment while the world scrolls past their atrocities like social media background noise. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the organization running these death traps, is not a humanitarian group at all. It is a mercenary operation run by evangelical extremists close to both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, designed to provide cover for ethnic cleansing while creating killing fields for sport. The 8 sites operate for precisely 1 hour each morning, with Israeli forces firing on anyone who arrives early or stays late. It is humanitarian theater at its most grotesque. When confronted with their own soldiers' admission of mass murder, Netanyahu's response was particularly overwhelming. He dismissed the reports as blood libels. The Israeli military's own confessions of systematic war crimes are now branded as anti-Semitic lies. They have managed to weaponize victimhood so thoroughly that their soldiers' testimonies of murdering and raping children become evidence of persecution. Meanwhile, Western media dutifully parrots Netanyahu's denials. Headlines read, Netanyahu rejects report and Israeli military rejects report, as if the words of war criminals who deny their crimes carry more weight than those of war criminals who confess to them. The propaganda is so lazy it borders on parody. Israeli lobby asset Richard Kemp was found praising the safety of these sites, while gunshots could literally be heard in the background of his own video. The death toll statistics reveal the scope of this extermination campaign. Official counts hover around 55,000, but these only include identifying bodies brought to the barely functioning hospitals. The real number likely exceeds 100,000 souls, probably reaching at least 400,000 when accounting for those buried under rubble, vaporized by bombs, or disappearing without a trace. I'm actually glad they mentioned that because I think we talked about this in terms of like how they lessen the number to make it seem not so bad. Although I would argue 55,000 is bad in of itself, but almost kind of how much does it take to call it a genocide? It's kind of like the game I feel like the West is playing. But I would argue like close to 500,000 seems more realistic given that there's so many people who are missing or bombed that we don't even know about or won't even ever know about, given the state of what's going on in Gaza right now. So I'm glad that they actually mentioned that it's probably close to maybe 500,000 people who've lost their lives at this point, instead of like, we've heard 30 for a while, then 40. I'm not sure we even have a count now of, at least in mainstream media, of how many people have perished in this assault. But anyway, the Gaza Health Ministry's latest list reads like a catalog of humanity's destruction. 11 pages of names before reaching a single child over 6 months old. 8 babies died on the day they were born. Their entire existence on this planet occurred during genocide. Israeli financial minister, which they crossed out to demon, Bezalel Smotrich, recently referenced Gaza's population as 1.8 million, down from the pre-war figure of around 2.2 million. This casual revision of...
Bezalel Smotrich. It definitely sounds demony, doesn't it?
Whatever. This casual revision of nearly 500,000 missing people may represent the most inadvertent omission of mass extermination in modern diplomatic history. Public opinion has collapsed for Israel's genocide project. Among Democrats, support has plummeted from over 50% to just 21%, with 60% now siding with Palestinians. Yet this Democratic rejection means nothing in a system where Congress functions as an Israeli subsidiary and members show up wearing IDF uniforms to legislative meetings. Sessions, sorry. The bitter irony is palatable. As the world braces for potential war with Iran, a conflict that would serve Israeli strategic interests, the ongoing extermination of Gaza has been regulated to background noise. The threat of future violence drowns out the reality of present genocide. Iran looms as tomorrow's crisis while children die today in killing fields designed by Israel and funded with Western weapons. This is the ultimate achievement of Israel's statecraft, making genocide boring. They have normalized mass murder so thoroughly that the systematic slaughter of civilians generates less media attention than political smear campaigns against Israel's critics. The mechanics of extermination have been refined into routine administration procedure, complete with operational names borrowed from children's games. We're perhaps witnessing something worse than the Nazi genocide, a killing machine that operates without shame, broadcasting its crimes as entertainment while the world treats industrialized child torture, rape, and murder as just another news cycle to scroll past. Centuries of Western white supremacist colonialism have turned the world into an inhumane hellhole where human life, Arab life, is worthless if you do not fall within the 7% of global people classified as ethnic European or white, which includes white Jews without a Semitic bone in them. The Palestinians of Gaza are dying in real time, turning into background characters in someone else's geopolitical drama, their screams muffled by the louder drumbeat of fake outcries against anti-Semitism, but not against Semites, mind you, but against blonde, white, ethnic Europeans calling themselves Jews.
Polish.
History will
bunch of folks, you know?
Right.
So
history
I think it's like,
will judge not.
I forget the percentage. Go ahead.
History will judge not just the perpetrators, but those who choose to look away while genocide becomes elevator music.
I mean, I think like it's like a crazy number, like 70 to 80% of them have like dual citizenship, you know? So, but,
and then it's the idea of like, okay, claim, all right, if you are indigenous, prove it. Oh, we don't have DNA, that's illegal. Okay, so
right. Well, that was the other fucking. The DNA results are fucking crazy too. Ugh.
Right. So,
and you find out all their real names after they changed them to make them more Jewish. It's hilarious.
Well, it's funny. Even Indy, he told me like, I won't say his last name because
it all gets
but he told me his name is. What's that?
Well, like they get changed twice, so like they get changed to be less Jewish when that wasn't popular, and then gets changed back to be more Jewish in Israel. Like, like you add that Goldberg on there, or Shlomo, any of those. Like what the Netanyahu isn't Netanyahu. It's like Milikowski or something like that. Someone will let me know.
Yeah, it's Milikowski. Yeah, Polish.
Right.
So, but you can try and change your names or whatever, but that doesn't make you indigenous.
Yeah.
So, but
no, they steal everything. That's how it works.
So anyway, let's go into this real quick. So this is from TRT World. This is what I pulled off of Instagram. So this is kind of like a precursor to the Haaretz article. I think actually they did pull this from the Haaretz article, actually. So inside the minds of Israeli killers in Gaza, I felt like a Nazi. It looked exactly like we were actually the Nazis and they were the Jews. Again, this is Israeli soldiers saying this. So,
Are we the baddies?
Testimonies from Israeli commanders and soldiers revealed that the army shoots any and all Palestinians approaching the corridor, including unarmed civilians and children, also leaving bodies exposed to scavenging animals. So we can play this real fast. It's a few seconds.
Okay.
Yeah.
One time, guards spotted someone approaching from the south. We took positions and just opened fire. I'm talking about dozens of bullets, maybe more. People around me were shooting and laughing. We approached the blood-covered body. He was just a boy, maybe 16.
Right.
Yeah.
So now let's get into the article. So again, this is just a taste. So this is an op-ed from Haaretz. As we said, this was, well, I think Haaretz is paywalled anyway. So there'll be no way. Yeah. So there'll be no way for any of you to read it unless you want to pay them. And I would not suggest it. But
I didn't.
But as I said, well, you went into your bag of magic tricks. You were able to pull the article for this.
Never pay, brother.
So we're going to do you all a solid. So we do you all a solid. We're going to read some of it. This was a long article. So we'll read the more important bits, or we might skim through some of it. So this article is called "It's a Killing Field." IDF soldiers ordered to shoot deliberately at armed Gazans waiting for humanitarian aid. IDF soldiers told Haaretz they were ordered to fire at armored crowds near food distribution sites in Gaza, even when no threat was present. Hundreds of Palestinians have been killed, prompted the military prosecution to call for a review into possible war crimes. Netanyahu, Katz reject claims, called them blood libels. So let's get into it. Israeli soldiers in the Gaza told Haaretz that the army had deliberately fired at Palestinians near aid distribution sites over the past month. Conversations with officers and soldiers revealed that commanders ordered troops to shoot at crowds to drive them away or disperse them, even though it was clear they posed no threat. In a statement released following publication of this expose, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz rejected the claims, which they called blood libels.
Whatever that
Gaza
means.
Humanitarian Foundation aid centers began operating in the Strip at the end of May. The circumstances of the foundation's establishment and its funding are murky. It is known to have been set up by Israel in coordination with U.S. evangelicals and private security contractors. Its current CEO is an evangelical leader close to U.S. President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So you brought this. This is a picture of said distribution site.
Yeah. From the Gaza Humanitarian Fund, right?
Right.
Yep. Which I
also
found
brought
this.
These. This is new.
So this is from Rami Abdul, right? And he puts, this is an announcement from the American-Israeli Gaza Humanitarian Foundation stating that aid distribution begins at 2 a.m. in the dead of night. But why such an hour? Because under the cover of darkness, people can be shot, killed, and disappeared far from cameras, far from witnesses, and far from accountability. What legitimate aid organization operates at this time in an active war zone with military forces everywhere? How can civilians possibly distinguish the presence of Israeli troops, especially when the army exploits these conditions to carry out large-scale killings? And keep in mind that, like, some people are having to travel on foot a long way. It takes a while.
Right. In the dark.
Like, something like 6 hours people walked. Like, you know... like craziness. you know, or had to taking horse-drawn carriages and whatnot, like, you know, so donkey carts, like what Jesus rode it on, you know,
Right.
like. Anyway, the center will open tomorrow morning at 2 a.m. So 6 hours before that would be what? That would be 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
Right. At night. So you'd have to start walking 8 o'clock at night. The minute it got dark, you should start walking. Name an Israeli IDF, IOF fucking sniper that wouldn't take every shot possible. Like, this is despicable shit. Ugh.
Let's continue. The distribution centers typically open for just 1 hour each morning. According to fish officers and soldiers who serve in the areas, the IDF fires at people who arrive before opening hours to prevent them from approaching, or again after the centers close to disperse them. Since some of the shooting incidents occur at night ahead of the opening, it's possible that some civilians can see the boundaries of the designated area. It's a killing field. Actually, we've read that in the article, so we don't need to read that. But in regards to shooting them, the soldier added, "We open fire early in the morning if someone tries to get in line from a few hundred meters away, and sometimes we just charge at them from close range. But there's no danger to the forces. According to him, I'm not aware of a single instance of return fire. There's no enemy, no weapons." He also said the activity in his area of service is referred to as Operation Salted Fish, the name of the Israeli version of the children's game Red Light, Green Light. IDF officers told Haaretz that the army does not allow the public in Israel or abroad to see footage of what takes place around the food distribution sites. Gee, I wonder why. According to them, the army is satisfied that the IGF's operations have prevented a total collapse of international legitimacy for continuing the war. They believe the IDF has managed to turn Gaza into a backyard, quote unquote, especially since the wars with Iran began.
So,
Um,
have you ever seen the show Squid Game?
no. You asked me this yesterday. I said no.
So, Squid Game is the premise of Squid Game is that you take children's games, right?
Mhm.
And, you know, there's this entire tournament of children's games, right? And you have to, if you lose, you die. These children's games, right? Like, it's like they have a thing with, like, you know, those little Dalgona candies that had the little shape imprinted in them, and you got to, like, cut out the shape perfectly, and, like, you can't break it. You break it, literally, dude comes up and shoots you in the show, right? So this red light, green light was turned into this doll, giant doll, would turn around, and if they caught you moving, they would shoot you.
Ugh. Okay.
That is red light, green light. That is what he is saying they are playing. That if you see a Palestinian move, you shoot them. That's red light, green light. That's Operation Salted Fish. Literally dystopian, nightmare-fueled science fiction. Like,
I was arguing in this day and age, a lot of science fiction is a lot more closer to real life, especially now.
Yep.
So, oh God.
Just to put that in context for people, some of you watch that. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You know? So, it's on Netflix, I think. You know? So good luck with that. Otherwise known as war crimes. Like,
Right.
ugh.
Anyway, Gaza doesn't interest anyone anymore, according to who? Said a reservist who completed another round of duty in the Northern Strip this week. It's become a place with its own set of rules. The loss of human life means nothing. It's not even an unfortunate incident like they used to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, Natalie in the chat, this is some sick-ish. Yes. Like, and again, just a reminder, like many of these soldiers are teenagers or early 20s. So the idea that children, like literally killing other children, and it means nothing to them.
And every single Israeli citizen has had to serve, you know?
Unless they fought against not serving, if they're actually
right,
brave enough to resist, and then they get in trouble for it.
Right. So, I mean, this is what's being encouraged.
Right, but it's literally like a video game, but in real life. That's what this reminds me of. No, yeah, worse than that. But it gives but that's kind of why, in a way, it's so detached because it's like, this isn't real. Like, this is like a video game. Like, I can just walk away from it. So this is real life. So so I can't imagine a kind of, this is brainwashing in essence, like, because I cannot imagine removing myself to the point where I feel no ways, and I'm not in the army, I've never been, so maybe you can think of it differently. Maybe in the chat, if you have, you can inform it. But for me, like, I'm not sure if I can just be so nonchalant about taking a life like that, especially like given if my life wasn't threatened, so I just don't have the stomach for it. So
I mean, that's what doesn't
I cannot
make
imagine
any sense with this, right? Like, they're literally saying there's no weapons. These are the soldiers saying, like, there's been no return fire. Zero. So, like, you can't even claim, like, they're taught that, like, if you fear for your life, whatever, that dumb bullshit, right? Just like we taught our soldiers, you can kill indiscriminately, like, there's not even that. There's not even that level of, like, this is just rampant slaughter, shooting fish in a barrel.
Right.
And literally fucking putting out a salt lick, essentially. You're leaving corn out. Like, dude, there's so many fucked up shit. History will not look kindly on any of this.
No.
So,
and again, this relates to my next segment. So, and given what Bob Dylan said, it's very appropriate. So, but we'll get into that later. An officer serving in the security detail of a distribution center described the IVS approach as deeply flawed. It's so pretty. It's just so pretty. It's just like, it's so deeply flawed. Like it takes away the monstrosity of this. It's like,
it's like, oopsies,
deeply flawed.
Oopsies.
Right. But anyway, working with a civilian occupation when your only means of interaction is opening fire, that's highly problematic to say the least, he told Haaretz. It's neither ethnically nor morally acceptable for people to have to reach or fail to reach a humanitarian zone under tank fire snipers and mortar shells.
Intersecting fields of
Gee,
fire.
According to accounts from commanders and fighters, the IDF was supposed to maintain a safe distance from Palestinian occupation areas and food distribution points. However, the actions of the forces on the ground do not align with the operational plans. Today, any private contractor working in Gaza with engineering equipment receives 5,000 shekels, which is roughly $1,500, for every house they demolish, said a veteran fighter. They're making a fortune. From their perspective, any moment where they don't demolish houses is a loss of money, and the forces like to have to secure their work. The contractors, who acts like a kind of sheriff, demolish wherever they want along the entire front. As a result, the fighter added, the contractors' demolition campaign brings them, along with their relatively small security details, close to distribution points or along the routes used by aid trucks. In order for the contractors to protect themselves, a shooting incident breaks out and people are killed, he said. These are areas where Palestinians are allowed to be. We're the ones who move closer and decide they endanger us. So for a contractor to make another 5,000 shekels and take down a house, it's deemed acceptable to kill people who are only looking for food. Oh, God.
Yep.
A senior officer whose name repeatedly comes up in testimonies about the shootings near aid sites is Brigadier General Yehuda Vash, commander of the IDF's Division 252. Haaretz previously reported how Vash turned the Nezarim corridor into a deadly route, endangering soldiers on the ground, and was suspected of ordering the destruction of a hospital in Gaza without authorization. Now, an officer in the division says Vash decided to disperse gatherings of Palestinians waiting for UN aid trucks by opening fire. This is Vash's policy, the officer said, but many of the commanders and soldiers accept it without question. The Palestinians are not supposed to be there, so the idea is to make sure they clear out, even if they're just there for food. Vash's division is not the only one operating in the area. It's responsible for northern Gaza, and therefore Vash's policy is relevant to those who loot UN aid trucks and not GHF sites. So you brought this as well.
Yeah, this is in the article.
Correct.
Oh yeah. This is from Gaza Notifications, right? Breaking thousands of starved Gazans stormed the dystopian Israeli-American aid complex in West Rafah, right? And this is, you know, of course they had to go through biometrics and like this is the amount of people you're talking about. This is I mean, at the very least, hundreds, more than that. Like, that's gunfire you hear. This was the aid, remember? Mm-hmm. This is what they were. This is what all that. I mean, they're drugging this food too, from what we've heard. Like,
right.
So here's more of that.
So what we are seeing in the horizon is Israel. And here we are seeing crowds of people waiting for the aid trucks to enter. And who knows if gonna enter or not. Like, people are waiting here for hours, not like expecting the aid to enter at any moment, but no guarantees. Okay, I'm getting closer and I can hear the gunshots very clearly.
So that's what's happening. You know, like hundreds of trucks are waiting just along that, you know. So
anyway, the soldiers said this has become routine. You know it's not right. You feel it's not right that the commanders here are taking the law into their own hands. But Gaza is a parallel universe. You move on quickly. The truth is, most people don't even stop to think about it. Earlier this week, soldiers from Division 252 opened fire at an intersection where civilians were waiting for aid trucks. A commander on the ground gave the order to fire directly at the center of the junction, resulted in the deaths of 8 civilians, including teenagers. The incident was brought to the attention of Southern Commander-Chief Major General Benir Assor, but so far, aside from a preliminary review, he has taken no action and has not demanded an explanation from Vash regarding the high number of fatalities in his sector. I was at a similar event. For what we've heard, more than 10 people were killed there, said another senior reserve officer commanding forces in the area. When we asked why they opened fire, we were told it was an order from above and that the civilians had posed a threat to the troops. I can say with certainty that the people were not close to the forces and did not endanger them. It was pointless. They were just killed for nothing. This thing called killing innocent people, it's been normalized. We were constantly told there are no non-combatants in Gaza, and apparently that message sank in among the troops. A senior officer familiar with the fighting in Gaza believes this marks a further deterioration in the IDF's moral standards. The power that senior field officers yield in relation to general staff leadership threatens the chain of command, he said. According to him, my greatest fear is that the shooting and harm to civilians in Gaza aren't the result of operational necessity or poor judgment, but rather the product of an ideology held by field commanders, which they pass down to the troops as an operational plan. Gee, you think?
yeah.
In recent weeks, the number of fatalities near food distribution areas have risen sharply. 57 on June 11, 59 on June 17th, and around 50 on June 24th, according to Gaza's health ministry. In response, a discussion was held at Southern Command where it emerged that troops had begun dispersing crowds using artillery shells. They talk about using artillery on a junction full of civilians as if it's normal, said a military source who attended the meeting. An entire conversation about whether it's right or wrong to use artillery, even without asking why that weapon was needed in the first place. What concerns everyone is whether it will hurt our legitimacy to keep operating in Gaza. The moral aspect is practically non-existent. No one stops to ask why dozens of civilians looking for food are being killed every day. So you also brought this. So this is the IDF shooting at civilians.
I mean, this is what starving people are willing to do for food, by the way. This is just basic human nature. Like, ugh.
Another senior officer familiar with the fighting in Gaza said the normalization of killing civilians has often encouraged firing at them near the aid distribution centers. The fact that live fire is directed at a civilian population, whether with artillery, tanks, snipers, or drones, goes against everything the army is supposed to stand for, he said, criticizing the decisions made on the ground. Why are people collecting food being killed just because they stepped out of line or because some commander doesn't like what they're cutting in? Why have we reached a point where a teenager is willing to risk his life just to pull a sack of rice off a truck? And that's who we're firing artillery at? There are many groups that oppose Hamas. Abdul Shabat went several steps further, he said. They control territory that Hamas doesn't enter, and the IDF encourages that.
Literally,
Another
ISIS.
officer remarked, Right.
Like, we covered this.
I'm stationed there, and even I no longer know who's shooting at whom. In a closed-door meeting this week with senior officials from the Military Advocates General Office, held in light of the daily deaths of dozens of civilians in near aid zones, the legal officials instructed that the incidents be investigated by the IDF's General Staff Fact-Finding Assessment Mechanism. Whatever that means. This body, established after the Mavi Mavara flotilla incident, is tasked with examining cases where there's suspected violation of the laws of war to fend off international demands to investigate IDF soldiers for alleged war crimes. During the meeting, senior legal officials said global criticism is over the killing of civilians is mounting. Senior officials in the IDF and Southern Command, however, claim the cases are isolated and that the gunfire was directed at suspects who pose a threat to the truce.
Yeah, whatever.
Right. A source who attended the meeting told Haaretz that representatives of the Military Advocate General's office rejected the IDF's claims. According to them, the arguments do not hold up against the facts on the ground. The claim that these are isolated incidents doesn't align with incidents in which grenades were dropped from the air and mortars and artillery were fired at civilians, said one legal official. This isn't about a few people being killed. We're talking about dozens of casualties every day. Although the Military Advocate General instructed the fact-finding assessment mechanism to examine recent shooting incidents, these represent only a small portion of the cases in which hundreds of uninvolved civilians were killed. Senior IDF officials expressed frustration that the Southern Command has failed to investigate these instances so thoroughly and is disregarding civilian deaths in Gaza. According to military sources, Southern Command Chief Major General Vani Assor typically conducts only preliminary inquiries, relying mostly on the accounts of field commanders. He has not taken disciplinary action against officers whose soldiers harmed civilians despite clear violations of IDF orders and the laws of war. As part of their operational conduct in the vicinity of the main access roads to the distribution centers, IDF forces are conducting systematic learning processes to improve their operational response to the area and minimize as much as possible potential friction between the population and IDF forces. So basically, instead of planning to shoot 50 people, we're going to shoot 45. That's essentially how it reads to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, recently, forces worked to reorganize the area by placing new fences, signage, opening additional routes, and more. Following incidences where there were reports of harm to civilians arriving at distribution centers, in-depth investigations were conducted, and instructions were given to forces on the ground based on the lessons learned. These incidents were referred for examination by the General Staff's debriefing mechanism. Okay, whatever. The Israeli army issued an additional response following publication of this expose, saying it strongly rejects the accusation raised in the article. The IDF did not instruct the forces to deliberately shoot at civilians, including those approaching the distribution centers. To be clear, IDF directives prohibit deliberate attacks on civilians. The Army added that any allegation of a deviation from the law or IDF directives will be thoroughly examined and further action will be taken as necessary. Don't know what that is. Don't get into specifics. Sure. Sure, Dan. The allegations of deliberate fire towards civilians presented in the article are not recognized in the field. I mean, again, just to summarize, you guys knew about this, but again, I felt, well, thank you for pulling this article fully, but I think, again, this is just damning how basically IDF soldiers are openly admitting there's no rhyme and reason to what we do. And again, remember, these are children. They are impressionable teenagers who essentially are just following orders, even if they don't want to. I want to give them some benefit of the doubt.
This to me is like if someone put candy in the gas chambers at Auschwitz, right? And like that to me is what is like they're putting literal food. This is the Hunger Games, right? Like what are we doing?
I mean,
what are we doing?
I mean, in my mind, this accounts as abuse to me because
Nazis.
this is.
I hate these guys.
I mean, these are, I would argue, men who are telling children to kill other people and children.
Yeah.
For what? You know, to, you know, like, and again, you can argue that brainwashing, propaganda, you know, relying Arabs, whatever, and we've talked about that before. Education, like we've talked about all of that before. But
religion.
Right, but at what point being on the ground and doing this doesn't your heart break? Like, and in fact, for many of them, it's, as they say, it's just routine. That's just how, again, like, where's your humanity? Like, these children lost it at such a young age. You know, so if anything, I hate the fact that I have sympathy, but I kind of do, because in a lot of ways, these, again, like these IDF soldiers, I don't want to say necessarily they're victims of the system, but in a way they are, because they've been programmed by adults. You can argue family, school, like rabbis, whoever, to be this, to do this in the name of the settler colony, essentially, is what it is.
Yeah.
And the idea of resisting, even if you believe that this is wrong, is either non-existent or, I'd argue, virtually impossible. So in my mind, in a lot of ways, on both sides, lives are lost. Obviously with the Palestinians, in terms of, you know, they're the ones getting shot at, but we can also argue for these, again, these are teenagers, Israeli teenagers who have lost their humanity. So on both sides, they're dead.
Yep.
You know, and it just makes me wonder, like, when they get older, like in their 30s and 40s, especially when they're out of the service, you know, how they feel, or, you know, what's their thinking. And you know what, actually, this might be actually a good time to bring on Miko Peleg again and kind of talk to him a little bit more about this, given that he's a general son. Like, I'm sure he had to kind of go through a lot of this, you know, even if not just adjacent in terms of, you know, like, but just kind of understanding more of the mind of what, of like an Israeli soldier, and like what strength do you need in order to kind of come out of it? I'm kind of wondering. So,
Right.
but yeah, I feel like this in all should be more reported about in mainstream media, but obviously it's not going to. But obviously this gives a lot of precedent to my next story with the band Bob Dylan and what they said regarding the IDF. And I'm sure they didn't know all this detail, but it gives validity to what they said. So, and it gives validity to how many people have felt anyway. So, but yeah, very damning. But, you know, but given that, again, the article is only people who are dying to read it will read it, but it's not going to be mentioned in mainstream media at all. And this is essentially, I feel like a lot of soldiers felt like, I can say this because nothing's going to get done about it. So there, it's almost kind of like, yeah, we do it, and now what? What are you going to do about it? Nothing. So it's almost kind of like that callousness of like, you can afford to say this thing because there's not going to be anything that that comes out of it. If anything, they believe that no one cares, which is far from the truth. But but they're right in the sense that mainstream media is not going to do this.
Yep, I'm with you. There's a lot of stuff that happens that the news won't tell you. Just to quote MF Doom.
But thank you guys for that. Was a long segment, but I think it's very important that you guys listen to this and at least on record, kind of sharing this article. But this is one of the reasons why we are demonetized, because we talk about stuff like this that is not favorable to the algorithm or YouTube sponsors. So the way you can help us, if you want us to continue reporting on stories like this, is if you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code at your screen there, or you can type in the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're on YouTube and you're in the chat, you can type in !donate, all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up. Anything as small as $1 will help us in terms of paying for the equipment and tech we need in order to produce this show and other shows on the network, as well as any extra money that you'll give us. Hopefully we can support other colleagues in the network to update their equipment. So just being completely transparent, your support helps us essentially pay for the bills that we need in order to keep these shows running, and we really do appreciate it. If you don't want to give on Ko-fi, you can give on PayPal, Substack, or CashApp. Those links are in the description. If we understand, money is tight, and we want you guys to take care of yourselves and communities first, but you still want to support us, the best and free way you can do that is word of mouth, as well as liking, sharing, and subscribing to our channel. Make sure, double check YouTube to make sure you are subscribed, because sometimes YouTube just kicks random subscribers off. So do a quick check. And let us know in the comments, or let us know if you see this as a segment. Had you had any idea of the reality of what Israeli soldiers are doing and their thoughts regarding their interactions with Palestinians in Gaza? Does it surprise you? I'm sure many of you know. And what do you think should be done about this? Again, as far as I know, we're the only ones who are going to report on this article. And I feel this should be very damning regarding the IOF and on us too, in a way that we're kind of complicit in what's happening in the territory right now. But in any case, thank you guys for watching, and we appreciate you sharing this content.